In the world where we have numbers to define the magnitude or substance of parameter in the question, it's amazing how the same number can many times represent the products that in terms of horological experience and pleasure can be a world apart. The number that sketches in our mind the scale or impression, where we relate it with the reference number to picture in our mind what the new number in real life means. Now, if that number is greater than the reference number in our mind, we naturally expect the picture in our mind to size bigger than the reference number we know of, which many times happens to be our sweet spot too. Now, if that number is related to the case size of the watch that we may be thinking of purchasing, our decision is many times based on that number and how we interpret it. What's more interesting is that many times, even though that number for watch case may be the same between two watches, even the manufacturer is the same, and for that matter, let's say the dial color, the dial layout, and also the overall vibe is similar, the watches in real life and on the wrist can be quite far apart in how they feel, look, and wear. In horological life, the way a watch wears is essentially what many times defines if it's a must-go or a no-go zone for us. If that number you came across was 41mm and what you're thinking about is Datejust 41mm, chances are that now with the release of 41mm Oyster Perpetual, you are confused about what are the similarities or differences between the two. Let me tell you, they may look similar from the photos or on paper being 41mm cases. When you wear them, being a watch enthusiast, they offer an entirely different and unique experience. And there are many reasons for the unique characters and experience they have to offer. Starting with the actual size of the watch, the size of DJ41 measured at the outer extremity of the fluted bezel is 39.21mm as opposed to 39.09mm on the OP41. So while they are both classed as 41mm cases, the overall dimension measured at the outer extremity of the bezel is very slightly less in the case of OP41. If you compare the horizontal measurements on the case with crown included, DJ41 measures at 42.27mm versus 42.15mm on the OP41. So again, very slight difference and only 0.1mm lesser size in case of OP41. If you're thinking that although the case dimensions are slightly bigger on DJ41, yet the OP41 looks bigger of the two, that's primarily due to the dial that's considerably bigger on OP41 versus DJ41. On the OP, the size of crystal on top of the dial measured on my caliber came out to be 33.45mm versus the size of crystal on DJ41, which is 32.05mm. So while the dimension on the outer extremity of the bezel is only 0.1mm smaller on the OP41, the dial size is about 1.5mm bigger, which in the watch world makes a fair bit of difference in how the watch looks and feels, and especially how it wears. And if you were thinking that despite the same size, the OP looked bigger of the two watches, you know the reason now. If you're concerned with how each of these watches wear on the wrist, the lug-to-lug height is the dimension you would want to know. And lug-to-lug on OP is 47.33mm as opposed to DJ41 that has lug-to-lug height of 47.27mm. So the difference is less than 0.1mm in vertical length, and it will be hardly even noticeable when you wear the watches side by side. That being said, the OP will have more wrist presence when you wear it due to larger dial that's bigger by 1.5mm. The measurement of lugs horizontally taken at the outer extremity where the bracelet connects is also slightly different in both of these watches. On OP, we have horizontal lug-to-lug dimension of 26.12mm versus DJ41, which has horizontal span of the lugs at the farthest ends of 26.67mm. So expect a slightly broader case horizontally in case of DJ versus OP, but only by 0.5mm on both lower and upper ends of the lugs. The difference is small, but you do feel it if attention to details do matter to you. In terms of case thickness, true to dressier attributes, DJ is the thinner of the two, but only by a slight margin. On my scale, DJ came out to be 11.64mm versus OP41 that has thickness of 11.8mm. The difference is only slight and you'd be pushed to feel it on the wrist even when they are side by side. DJ41 again stays true to its design attributes of being a dressy watch and comes in the case that is fully polished, and we have both case top surfaces at the lugs and case sides that are offered in polished finish. OP41 on the other hand stays true to its sporty characters, and we have top surfaces of the lugs or the case that are fully brushed and the case sides are polished, so it does carry with it some bling factor to make it versatile enough to remain suitable for formal occasions too. The dial color on both of these watches is blue, but the shade of blue on DJ41 does appear to be slightly darker, and you can gauge the difference, especially if you look at the darker shades of the dial. And on the DJ41, the dial where the shadows are almost looks black, as opposed to OP41 that looks to be darker blue even in the shadow areas. The difference in the shade of color is so slight that it is quite possible that the shade is actually the same, but it looks different due to the type of crystal on top, which is different in both of these watches. Speaking of the type of crystal on top of these watches, the crystal, from what I've researched, on top of DJ41 has no internal or external air coating applied to it. But if you can see the dial on OP41, it does actually look to be clearer and more transparent of the two. The difference on the dial clarity is easily noticeable to naked eye, and although it's hard to capture from the camera, I believe it is still noticeable even on the screen. The laser edge crowns at 6 o'clock position on both of these watches also reflect different logo, and I have explained this in my sub 40 versus sub 41 comparison as per the link above, to show how the new logo at the crystal differs from the old. Since the OP is technically an entry-level Rolex and the price is reflected on the logo at the clasp, and we have stamped or engraved Rolex logo on OP as opposed to DJ where we have welded Rolex logo, and this minor detail does change the wrist experience. The width and length of the clasps on both of these watches is exactly the same. None of these watches come with safety or flip-lock clasp system, but we do have on both of these clasps 5mm extension link system and also micro adjustments, which is a welcome feature. Putting the watches in the dark to compare the lume shot, the first thing you'll notice is that both of these watches come with beautiful blue lume, which is bright, consistent and fully functional. Another thing you might notice is that there's much more lume filled in the minute hand of OP versus the DJ, which does align with the tool nature of OP. Thanks to the lack of date in OP, it showcases a symmetrical lume too, as opposed to DJ, which has a missing lume index at 3 o'clock naturally due to the date. I left the watches in the dark for another 15 minutes, and although the DJ in this comparison is at least a 2 years old watch versus the OP that's brand new, the lume is consistent in both of these watches, and brightness is also head to head, so I take it as a tie. On the wrist, being true to 41mm sizes, both of these watches will have a wrist presence that you really won't miss. Since the lug to lug on both of these watches is about the same, there's essentially no as such difference between how they wear. That is, if one of these two watches overhangs your wrist, so will the other. But if either of these watches wears fine, you won't be disappointed with the other. That being said, since the dial size on OP is 1.5mm bigger than DJ, you might find its overall face to be slightly larger on the wrist than that of DJ. But then again, Since DJ has a fluted bezel which shimmers and shines as if it has gems applied on it, it may still remain more noticeable of the two from the third person's perspective, especially when you remember the DJ also has Jubilee bracelet with polished and shiny center links that, although complements its dressier nature, yet makes it a bit louder of the two. My wrist size is 6.5 inches and wristband is 55mm, and I can personally wear both of these watches without a problem. Which one is a better watch between the two is really a wrong question. Which one suits your needs better is more of an appropriate question. If you're looking for a sporty watch that not only offers 100 meters of water resistance with screwed-on crown, but is also underrated due to all brushed finish, yet offers a stunning sunburst blue dial to glorify the experience, OP will suit your preference better. But if you want a more elegant of the two watches, a watch with dressier characters due to fluted bezel and then Jubilee bracelet, and relatively blingy elements with classic looks yet the sporty attributes like 100 meters of depth rating, DJ have you served better. Or put it this way, if you primarily want a casual or sporty watch that can still also be used with formal dresses or occasions, OP is it for you. But if you primarily want a dressier and a formal watch that can still also be used for casual events, DJ it is.